Hey guys, Effie here. Today I'm going to make this card using our 6x6 Blooming Peony background stamp. Now this is a cling stamp, so all you need to do is just peel off that protective backing paper and just mount it onto the door of a MISTI or whatever stamp positioning tool that you have. You can also use a 6x6 acrylic block. If you don't have any of these tools, you can keep the protective paper on and just lay your card onto the face of your stamp and use something like a baron to get a nice crisp impression. So I stamped this gorgeous image onto some watercolor paper using some black pigment ink because I'll be doing some clear embossing over the image. One tip when you're doing some clear embossing on white paper or cardstock, make sure you use an anti-static powder tool because I found that after I watercolored this panel, there were specks of the embossing powder that kind of stuck to some areas where I didn't want it to. So make sure you use that anti-static powder tool before you do your embossing. You're going to see that my final or finished project will have a bit of a grainy look to it, and that's because some of the clear embossing stuck to areas outside of the stamped image. But it's actually okay. The final result was totally fine with me, but it's just something that I noticed, and if you're a perfectionist, just make sure you use that anti-static tool. Alright, I'll be doing some watercoloring today with Ken Oliver Color Burst, and for this first large gorgeous peony image, I'm going to paint with the Indigo Color Burst. Before I put down any pigment, I did wet the area with some clean water first, and I'm using two fine tip Pentel Aqua brushes. Inside the chamber of these Aqua brushes is just clean water. I don't have any ink or paint inside the chambers. I get asked this a lot. I only ever have clean water inside these chambers. So any color that you ever see on my projects, I usually pick up that color with the brush tip and I put that color down with the same brush tip and usually blend the color out. So I do get asked these questions a lot, so here I am providing the answers. So I'm doing some wet on wet watercoloring to get a really nice blend. I wet the area first with clean water. I put down a little bit of Indigo Color Burst paint into the inner portions of all of my petals, and then I blend that color out towards the edges of the outer portions of my petals. After I put down a little bit of that first layer of indigo color, I did go back and add a second Orchid Color Burst tone to my peony because I want that two-tone look going on with this peony. After I blend a little bit of that orchid color out, I go in with more of the indigo paint to add a little bit of shading to the inner portions of my peony. You want the areas that are closer to the center of your flower to be darker because this is where you have the least amount of light hitting the flowers or the petals. So naturally they're going to be a little bit darker as you get closer to the center of your flowers. And as you get closer to the edges or outer edges of your petals, that is where you have more light hitting that area. So naturally those areas are going to be lighter. For my second large peony on this Blooming Peony stamped image, I'm actually reversing my colors. So I'll be using my Orchid Color Burst to put down that first base layer of color, and then I'm adding indigo to the inner portions of my petals for shading. Using the same painting technique that I use for the larger peony on this peony, I'm just using the reversed colors. For the smaller flowers, I actually use a similar technique, but the painting for the smaller areas did go by faster because they are smaller. So I'm just going to turn on some music while I finish painting. For the smaller peonies in this image, I use a combination of Indigo and Orchid color bursts. For the foliage, I use a combination of lime green and Terre color bursts. I put down a little bit of the lime green first, and then I use a Terre color burst for the inner portions of the leaves for added shading. Once my painting was complete, I set my panel aside to dry, and then I took this birthday word scripty die and measured it alongside a piece of cardstock and our double-sided adhesive. What I'm making is our own basically scripty word die sticker. So what I did was after I measured my word die along these two sheets of cardstock and double-sided adhesive, I fussy cut that area out, and then I adhered the double-sided adhesive right onto the cardstock. Then I ran the entire sticker paper that I basically custom made through my die cutting machine. Once I ran it through my die cutting machine, I popped the die out and popped my scripty birthday word out, and I am left with a gorgeous sentiment die cut. Once I released my die cut sentiment from the actual die, I just poked out all of those negative parts and set the birthday die cut aside. Then I took this Happy Mother's Day sentiment stamp from our Peony Duo set, and I just white heat embossed the happy onto some navy cardstock, which I cut into a strip. The strip is 5.5 inches wide and will run across the entire front of my project today. And then I took the largest die from our double stitch rectangles large set, and I die cut my watercolored panel to add stitching to the edges of this A2 size watercolored panel. Next, I used some glue dots to adhere the happy strip right onto my panel. For the birthday word die cut, all you need to do is take that protective paper backing off the back and just adhere that right down onto your project. The final step of this project, I just mounted my finished panel onto a top folding A2 size card base using our strong double-sided adhesive, which I cut into strips from the sheets. My card is now complete. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.